Hello there. We are here at the Citizens Festival, which is the Bürgerfest, organized by the German president. And a very interesting thing happening this year. For the first time, the theme for this occasion is in an African language in Swahili, which is Pamoja, meaning stronger together. And my name is Fatou, Ellika, Muloshi. I've been fortunate to moderate a very interesting panel here on the YouTube stage on learning from each other as equals, fair partnerships between Germany and Africa. And basically what we'll be talking about is how can international initiatives and private partnerships foster fair and balanced collaborations, void of one-sided dependencies and more of knowledge sharing. And with me I have two panelists, one from the German tech giant Siemens Group, and they've been ably represented by Sabine Dall'Omo. She's the CEO of Siemens Sub-Saharan Africa, has worked on Africa for over 2 decades now. And with her is also Claus Stäcker. Claus is the head of programs for Africa at Deutsche Welle. And he also has similar experience working on the African continent, but also works with the Agile Network as well. In a way, sits on the panel, decision-making, judging panel for innovative Africans that have very innovative work that they want to share, and of course network together with their German counterparts here in Germany as well. And I want to say welcome both of you, and thank you for being on this panel.
Thank you.
So I just want to start with Sabine, because when we look at the tech sector, for example, which is the area that you work in, especially in Africa, we're mostly also talking about the gender gap here. Already women make up about 30 to 40%, 20 to 30% to be sure, of the ICT workforce in Africa. That's less than a quarter percentage. So how is your work with your African counterparts helping to shift this narrative?
Well, for once, thanks for having me, and also having that very important question, because, you know, Africa in general is very much a male-dominated society. Specifically, women do struggle to get access to the market. There are a few countries where legislation helps, like for instance South Africa. We have a very strong Employment Equity Act by which, you know, we want to have women representation. And if you just look at our own workforce, we have currently a representation in our organization of 49% being female, and 29% of our engineers are female. But what is for us important, we need to ensure, first of all, that we find these kind of talents not only in South Africa but also in the other markets, as we are rapidly expanding into the markets. And secondly, for us it's important to also identify young women and making them known of what kind of work we actually offer and what kind of jobs they can get in the tech sector. Because often women are not exposed in their society, in their countries, in their families, to the type of work we do in Siemens. And so what we did, we embarked, for instance, in a partnership, and you can see it here at the President's Festival. We call it the African Girls CanCode, by which we partnered with 5 countries, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Senegal and South Africa, with their education departments, and UN Women Germany, to foster digital training, meaning coding, basic coding camps, and cybersecurity for the advancement of women. And we took in about 625 girls to have this kind of experience.
Yeah, and in your partnerships and in these collaborations, what have you identified as the biggest challenge in bridging the gender gap in tech in Africa?
One of the biggest challenges really is that a lot of young girls have no exposure to tech. They do have a cell phone, but they don't really have role models helping them to understand, you know, how a tech job could look like. What does an engineer do? What does, you know, a software coder develop? Because they just don't have these role models in their society. And so finding them and making them attractive to a kind of business we do is one of the big hurdles. The second one is often as well, because the way that the society is very much male-dominated, young girls tend to be very shy when it comes to being, you know, on a LinkedIn platform, being in a Teams meeting, presenting in a Zoom meeting, switching on the camera, feeling good about yourself, and being there in the present.
In the present, yeah.
So that is definitely one of the big challenge.
Let me just come to you, Claus. You're not only into management, but also in programming and talent development in Africa. How are you ensuring that your programs with your African counterparts, it's really collaborative and not restrictive in nature?
That's a good question. I think it has to do with our staff, with our personnel. When you look at who creates our programs, 94% of them is coming from Africa. We have correspondents on the ground, more than 200. Amongst them, by the way, the girls of mute reporters, teenage reporters, youngsters between 14 and 18, who have the opportunity to get their daily challenges heard and counter traditional narratives, and also they challenge typical male professions, for instance. Think like, why can't I do that? And how do we do that in a collaborative way? I think social media is the answer, because people approach us. We are in dialogue already. So we have more than 400 partner media in Africa. So they give us also a call. So we are in a permanent dialogue about our content, and it's the young people who contribute and say, like, we want to have a voice, and that's how we started on social. People accepted our channels as a neutral platform to discuss their own issues.
Yeah, and how do you ensure that these issues that they are actually discussing are truly reflective of the diverse voices that are represented in Africa?
Yeah, it's
kind
true.
of done in a very more constructive journalism we're talking
That's
about.
true. That's true. That's what because of course that's a permanent criticism on Western media, that they only serve the bad news of Africa. We want to counter that. We want to deliver the entire picture. We want to reflect the dynamics that is there. And I know we have a very young continent. We have to somehow live with that. And so when we started exactly such a project called the 77%, reflecting the age group of the under 35 years old. And it started on social media. People exchanged their views. We portrayed activists, even coders, young entrepreneurs, artists, people who try to change their personal environment, their neighborhoods. So they didn't have a voice. In most of the local media, they didn't have a voice. They don't have a voice in parliament, in national assemblies. So I think we had to fill that gap a little bit. Now we have local partners who love our programs. And I think it's a very interactive way we're approaching content, and we discuss with them. We are right there on the ground.
Very well. And let me just come to you, Sabine, in your girls' CanCode Initiative. How are you ensuring that these programs are really yielding sustainable impacts, and that these beneficiaries are not just seen as aid recipients, but who can go on to create long-lasting leadership decisions for themselves?
Well, for one part of our coding camp was a mentoring program, and so we call it Siemens, Empower Her, and we matched the 625 girls with about 320 mentors from our Siemens organization and external companies across the globe. And what means they had like a one-on-one relationship, more or less, having a female person somewhere in the world who can give you guidance, who can assist you, who also can talk to you about how their experience was growing up into the function where they ended up, and keeping that relationship going. What the positive thing about it was that it was for the girls very encouraging to see what is possible in other areas of the world. And for the partners which have mentored these young girls, they got a better understanding of the challenges in Africa, because often, as mentioned, the narrative for Africa is about conflict and climate change and catastrophe, is not about really the root of development, the hunger young Africans have to be self-sustained and to develop things by themselves. Think about Kenya, it's called the Silicon Savannah for a reason, because they have so many digital talents. And so what we do is, through our partner network, also to help these young women to be absorbed into, for instance, training programs, receiving bursaries, just by being on LinkedIn during that year and having a professional presentation, a number of them have received internships and bursaries, and a few of them are going to be absorbed into the German workforce, which we have already on the African continent with more than 600 companies.
And talking about the workforce, how do you see the traditional development cooperation also hindering some of the projects that you have, and just how are you overcoming them to create more mutual and sustainable partnerships?
Yeah, for us, really what is important, we work with a country where the cultural difference is not too big, because there are few African countries, unfortunately, where it will be very difficult to, overcome the traditional role which is defined. But for the ones where that's more liberal, we don't actually see a big stumbling block, because the women themselves, they basically absorb that kind of access we give them, and they grow by themselves. So if I give you an example about the Senegalese girls, they are really outstanding, because obviously they speak French, the course was in English, the mentoring was largely in English, and they use digital means like, for instance, Google Translate to get the mentoring sessions going, to run through the programs, and the results which I have achieved after this year are just fascinating. And you're more than welcome to come and visit some of them, because they are so full of fire for digital technology.
That is very fascinating. And yes, Claus, we also would want to add on this. How do you see these traditional development corporations? Have they hindered your work with your African counterparts? And do you see this working in together with the agile economy? Coexisting.
Definitely, and I would accept the invitation of Sabine. You know, because that's exactly the characters, the role models we need and we want to portray to inspire others. That's the idea. Same idea goes with the Agile Young Leaders in Business program. So it's a nice exchange. People, they create, they come together, and there's so much energy in the room when they start creating joint ventures and so. And I believe in that, and there's so much dynamics in the young generation in Africa. So when we lose that, then we lose the continent. So we have to promote it, we have to work on that. I'm happy that you said we also have to challenge these traditional roles. I mean, why must a 15-year-old girl end up doing housekeeping, getting pregnant early, have to break up school? And so this is what we have to challenge. I think that they have a really equal chance, opportunities, access to education, to high tech and so on. And I'm really impressed by this program. More than 600 young girls coding. That's amazing.
Very, indeed. And let's just also talk about how can transparency and accountability be built into these partnerships to address power imbalances in general.
Yes, we can just promote that. We are not changing the world, but we see ourselves, our role as enablers, bridge builder, and so. We want to enable young people to find the right information to make their own decisions, because we know this is limited in some countries, so they don't get access to all the information they would need, and then they can make their own decision, and they should change their own countries first. And with their majority, there is a chance.
Yeah. And then, of course, Sabine, how does Siemens measure impact in these different projects that you have created in Africa, and ensuring that your people, these young women, go on to really do good things for themselves in future?
Yeah, for one, we keep them connected into the social network we have created through Empower Her, where we have multilateral levels of connectivity between the young girls and our organization and other mentors. The second part, obviously, the program will run on, so it's not a one-time session, it's something which we will continue, because we really have seen that it's such a game changer for these young girls, and that with very little time and effort, just by making it personal, you can help them to come out of the shell and position themselves. One thing what we try with our technology on the African continent, and this is one thing we advocate, where we also have a great partnership, for instance, with GIZ in Germany, is getting access to water and electricity, because that's the biggest hindering for young girls in Africa to have access to education, because when there is no water and there is no electricity, young girls are taken out of school, to go to the forest, find wood or carry for kilometers water.
Yeah.
So the game changer really is that kind of basic infrastructure. It also goes along, with education opportunities, because they continue to stay in school and rather being, servant to the household.
And before I even move on to the last part on Claus, I just want you to tell me, how can companies work with Africans as equal partners in development?
Well, we do that in Siemens since more than 160 years. We have African shareholders, we have African partners, and we do intensive enterprise development activities, not only in South Africa but also in our other countries, because for us it's important, if we do projects, and if you think about what we do in Egypt currently, if we do project, we need to take the local community with. They need to be part of it because they need to accept the service delivery and look after it once, the installation has been done.
Okay.
And so that fostering is our way.
And Claus, lastly, how do you also see these partnerships being sustained, the current ones that you've built so far?
I mean, we try to keep in contact.
Yeah.
We try to expand. For instance, our youngsters, the girls who we work on, once they have reached the teenage age and they have to leave this program, so that we feel a responsibility for them. So as we speak, we're working on a program that gives them, who's interested in a media career, for instance, who gives them some tools, some instruction, some training, so that they can go on that way, and they learn the roots, the basis with us.
Yeah.
So that's the little we can do, perhaps.
Very well. Thank you so much, Madam Sabine, and of course, Mr. Claus Stäcker, for your insightful contributions on this.
Thanks,
Thank you
Fatou.
so much. I was Fatou Ellika Muloshi, and this is the YouTube stage. Thank you for watching.